Okay. Thank you. We'll call this regional council meeting to order. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is being recorded and published on a publicly accessible website. And while in council chambers, please respect social distancing. Council CAO additions. I have no additions.
Yes, Mayor, I have one CAO addition for just a quick update to council on some of the restart. And also Stacy's going to walk through a little bit of a process in terms of what we're doing in the background as part of the restart plan. So council has an understanding.
Any council additions tonight? Very well. We have an addition. Ms. Vandersteen is going to speak to us about the Visitor Info Center, and I think we can do that just after the adoption of the minutes. Can I get a motion then to adopt the agenda? Moved by Councillor Dolan, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Adoption of minutes to special regional council meeting of May 26, 2020, special regional council of June 2nd, and the special regional council of June 9th. Can I have a motion to adopt those minutes, please? Moved by Councillor Gerling, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Carried. Mrs. Vandersteen. Visitor Info Center.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak on short notice, and I apologize for that. I had a long meeting this afternoon, while it was a webinar actually, with WorkSafe BC. And as part of that, there was a discussion around American travelers. And I also had a meeting or conversation last week with Border Crossing Services. And kind of the long and short is that American travelers, when they cross the border, are required to quarantine for 14 days. They can do that while they're traveling through the country. They're expected to travel through as quickly as possible. They're also expected to stay pretty much in their vehicles. This is what they're being told at the border, and Border Crossing Services confirmed it for me. They can stay in lodging, but they are quarantined in their rooms and only check in and check out. They're supposed to carry enough food with them that they don't have to go into stores. And they are supposed to use pay at the pump and those kinds of services and limit as much contact as possible. So when we questioned them about things like visitor centers, WorkSafe BC was really clear in their answer today, and that is if anybody, American or not, has been out of the country in the last 14 days, they are not to enter the building or any building, and that people should actually have that sign on their doors. So just wanted to update you. We are open. We opened on Monday. We have had some Americans. They've been very nice. That said, there's a new sign going up tomorrow to say if you if you've been outside of Canada in the last 14 days, to please not enter. And then we've also said on that signage that we are still here to help you if you need assistance, and we've got the phone number on there. And so we can certainly help them that way, and we'll look at other digital means as well. We can get packages to them outside if they need maps or any of that kind of thing, but they shouldn't be entering the building if they have been outside of the country within that time period. So I just wanted to bring you guys up to speed, give you a heads up that we're going to make those changes.
Has this affected employment at all at the visitor center?
This will not affect employment at all at the visitor center.
Okay. Are there any questions from council? Mrs. Vandersteen. Thank you for that update.
Thank you.
Moving on, is there any further public comment? Very well. Coronavirus emergency operations summary report number 4. Mr. Barry?
Aaron's just grabbing her mic. Sorry. Turn it on.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight you've been presented with report number 4 of the EOC operation summary report. This will be the last operation summary report coming to council in this particular format. The EOC is reverting down to a level 1 activation. And as mentioned in the report, we are rolling the various activities that are going to continue into the operational departments that are going to be responsible for that particular activity. So on a a high level, the EOC activities are basically going to be continuing on worker safety and the development of safety plans, risk assessments, and safe operating procedures for municipal operations. Community outreach, for the most part, will be going and rolling into the recreation department and under Krista Pearson, and will, given regulations and guidelines, it's a natural fit to help with a lot of the community measures, outreach, and the well-being. They have asked to, in terms of the recreation department, to continue with, should I figure out my notes here? The fire department, for the time being, is going to continue to do wellness checks, which is that once daily drive around for the help and okay signs for some of our more vulnerable persons. Because under provincial order, we are still mandated to support vulnerable persons in our communities. They have not stopped the birthday drive-bys. They just have no more requests. They had 2 to finish that off. So they're not saying no. They're not stopping it. They'll just base it on requests. So the wellness checks, I'm sorry, did I mention they're going from 2 down to once per day? So they were twice a day. They were once in the morning and once in the evenings, and they're now just going to happen in the evenings around 6:30 to 7 at dinner time. So that's the drive-by wellness checks. For the rec center, they would like to continue helping out with the food bank deliveries and the IGA food service delivery to some of the more vulnerable persons as well. That is going to go to once every 2 weeks in line with the food bank delivery day. They are finding that particular activity very valuable to connect with people and to sort of get that continued established relationship, and they're finding the uptake to be valuable to the people, that they've got somebody coming in that they feel comfortable with, they're having a conversation with, and often it leads to another, did you know about this? And did you know about that? And it's kind of that community connection for those who may still be quite hesitant to leave their homes. And so they're finding that that's really valuable, especially in the Grace Manors and that kind of thing. So they've made quite a connection with that particular group with the SEED program as well, and just helping to support them through this. So the community outreach, the other activity that's going to be sort of continuing is going to be the communications, the email to that community service group with updates for each other. And I think there's about 50 that they have on the list. Many are similar to the community roundtable group that meets regularly. So that activity is going to be continuing, sharing information as much as possible, making sure everybody knows about different programs, what each are doing. So that activity will also continue under the community measures and outreach. Under the business outreach, the business working group is continuing. It's been providing value. It's mainly been being directed through the chamber with some assistance from staff, and they're hoping to bring back some more strategic initiatives for council consideration. Again, we're going to be continuing with the website to keep both businesses and residents up to date on, we're going to try to keep it as most relevant information. We're going to stop the continual, but there's been any large announcements, any changes to existing programs for businesses, such as funding or any different kind of grants. We'll try to keep that up to date. And we're going to continue to keeping our safe work procedures and safety plans on our website so that businesses in town don't have to recreate. They can rob and duplicate, and we'll share whatever we can to help save them some work. So we're going to continue that promotion and distribution of good topical relevant information. A lot of the other activities of the business outreach are going to fall into the economic recovery and the economic development team and what they're doing, and continuing to search for opportunities, continue with the focus on uplifting local and supporting local and keeping that focus on there. We're going to be ceasing the active media monitoring, so those updates that council has been getting on the news, because the news is pretty straightforward now. It's pretty much a continuation. We are going to have somebody monitor the news, and if something big does break or something happens, we will absolutely re-trigger that and send that information out. But you won't be receiving those bi-weekly or weekly news briefings anymore. So, and I think that is the gist of how things are going to be rolling forward. For any of the different initiatives that have been happening, council will receive updates from the regular departments now. So if it's an economic update, you'll receive it from the regional development team. If it's a rec update, you'll receive it from the recreation department. So those activities are kind of leaving the EOC now and becoming business as usual.
Thank you. Councillor Gerling.
Yeah, would it be easy to get a statistical report on how many people accessed that information page that we had that started for COVID, if we could get the stats on that?
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Andrews.
Just for some clarification on the last line in your local updates for the Northwest Health, are they applying for July? Because I think they already got their Junes.
It may be incorrect. They've applied for many. It was tough to keep up. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, thank you for that update, and thank you to the staff for doing the work to keep in touch with people and to inform them of all these advances to COVID-19. And I think the efforts of our staff really does build community. We'll move on. We have no proclamations, no petitions. Admin report number 45, the application to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing Infrastructure Planning Grant for the Ministry of Municipal Affairs for the Northern Rockies Airport Wastewater Management Plan, or Wastewater Master Plan. Mr. Barry.
Terry's on the line, so he can speak to that one quickly there.
Cavalier.
I'm not sure Jaylene wants me on video or not. It's nice to see you guys again. It's been a long 3 months. So this is a grant to assist with our already approved budget for the airport sewer master plan. There's lots of infrastructure out there that is in various states of disrepair and decay, and this will help us forge a plan forward.
Very well. Are there any questions, councillors? Very well. I'll ask for a motion the application be made to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing Infrastructure Planning Grant Program for funding of up to $10,000 to update the Northern Rockies Region Municipalities Airport Wastewater Master Plan. Can I have that motion? Councillor Andrews. Moved by Councillor Andrews, a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Administration report number 46, Parker Lake Road Maintenance. Mr. Barry.
I can speak to this, and Luann is there also for council's resolution here a couple of weeks back in regards to the maintenance of the road. And Luann, if you want, you can take over from me and walk through the report if you wish.
You were doing fine, but you got me on the spot now. So the report was written in a request to provide a cost associated with the maintenance of Parker Lake Road, which is under provincial jurisdiction. The estimated cost to rehabilitate the road is $25,000, for which the bulk of that is crush, actually about $20,000. The remaining work includes ditching, drainage, and the reestablishment of the shoulders and grading. If we wanted to simply grade the road, that would cost up to about $800,000, but would only have short-term benefits without gravel application. Harvey has reached out to BC Parks to identify some potential to provide some level of maintenance to the road. The province has indicated that there's no budget for it at this time. However, they would provide authorization for other agencies to provide work. upon confirmation of a scope of that work. Harvey's continuing to work with them to see if there's any further opportunities. And it is presented for council's consideration to potentially write a letter to the province requesting improvements to be made to Parker Lake Road.
Thank you. Now, for clarification, you said the grading was $800 to $1,000. Is that correct?
It'll cost actually $600 to $800. So
Very well. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Barry, you want to speak?
And I believe the road might have got graded here over the past couple of days. Yeah, someone actually went in and yes, yeah, so it was, which has been typical for that area. Is some people, locals have donated their time and equipment, and so the grader blade got dragged over yesterday, I guess, right? Yeah.
Very well. Councillor Gerwin.
I would like to make a motion that we write a letter for sure, to try to get some support for the upgrading of that road. And also I would like the motion for the municipality to keep Parker Lake Road on the radar. So if it needs to be graded again for $600 or $800, I think that we can afford to do that a couple of times throughout the season until we can find a grant or somebody else responsible to upgrade that road.
So Councillor Gerwin, that's a motion then?
Yeah.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Dolan. Before we move to a vote, Councillor Andrews, you had a question or a comment?
Sorry. So this $25,000 estimate, is that an in-house estimate, or was that we were hiring contracted work for that?
That was contract outside of our own in-house. Yeah, that was contract work.
Okay, and is there any money in contingencies and like for the 25 grand? Could we pull it from somewhere if we were to, or is it money that we would have to levy?
If council wished to proceed, yeah, we would. Well, it would be levied money, but it would be pulled from, for instance, our roads program.
Okay, so there's a potential for that if we went that way.
Yeah. So the funds are in reserve if required. They're
okay.
Yeah.
And this
Understood.
This road does not belong to the Northern Rockies. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. So just some history. So the road is actually through the Parks and Trails program. So and which is the same that they look after the rec sites and trails within the province. So Beaver Creek is an example, or Tearing Rock Trail, or those types of things. In a lot of cases, and I've done, so between myself and Luann and Harvey, we've been making some connections and just trying to figure out what angles was the best approach. But at the end of the day, in a lot of cases, what happens at times during at a rec site similar to Parker Lake is that the MODI might maintain the roads, the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure, and the Parks and Trails look after and maintain the site. Interesting enough, this one here doesn't. It falls under the Parks and Trails jurisdiction, and they have very little budget funds. Right. I did talk to MODI, and the district manager out of Dawson just suggests there's a contractor here, being Dawson Road Maintenance, who looks after the ministerial roads, the provincial roads, to see if they would potentially, if MODI would go in and do that, do some work there. And didn't get a whole lot of traction at first, but they provided us with the contact for the Parks and Trails, our connection, our contact that we had already been in contact with. So we can absolutely, as the resolution is, keep an eye on the road, and then additionally is continue to see if we can put some pressure on to see if there's a different avenue or an opportunity for the province to look after and maintain that road, because it is in disrepair. And as Luann said, the bulk of the cost would be gravel, but there's no sense to put any gravel there unless there's proper ditching and drainage. Otherwise, you just lose gravel because the water has nowhere to go.
Councillor Andrews.
And just my last question, how big of an ordeal would it be to request that comes under our jurisdictions, that road? It's utilized by almost everybody in the Northern Rockies municipality. So for us to just adopt it as one of our roads, what would that look like?
The province might jump at it. But be careful what you wish for. In terms of process, it's not in our road inventory, of course, and it's not in Modi's road inventory. So it's essentially in nobody's inventory currently, besides having it's under the jurisdiction of Parks and Trails, and it'll have a road designation or a designation on it. But I mean, it would be the process. I don't necessarily know what the process specifically would be step by step, but the province would possibly have not too many issues if they went to go through the motions to pass it over to us, for sure, because that's one less thing they have to worry about, one less budget item, one less challenge we have. And what we try to do is, in all honesty, is have the right jurisdiction take responsibility of it and do what should be done there, right? And that's that's the conversations that we've been having. The contact with Parks and Trails has been very good to deal with, but again, we're quite well versed on their budget process, because similar issues in the past around upkeep with Beaver Creek, for example, it was through a grant program a number of years ago that we were able to partner with the province, do some work there, but had some grant funding to clean up Beaver Creek, which was left in disarray and disrepair for quite a number of years. When it came to the outhouse, for example, outhouses were in disarray. There was danger trees, et cetera, et cetera. Campsites overgrown. So
if we could get the province to do something with that road, what would be the cost of maintenance of that road? If we could get the province or some other entity to upgrade the road to invest the $25,000, would it be a significant amount to the Northern Rockies to maintain it?
If it's done right, not necessarily. Then it's more upkeep and maintenance. I mean, down the road, you always have to put back in, similar to our other roads. I mean, we're out in McConaughey Loop, for example, this year, taking some looks at our areas where we have gravel requirements and things like that, even though there's been work done in the past out there. So it's just, routine maintenance would be keeping the road graded and keeping the crown on the road and hoping you don't lose the gravel and the drainage is maintained. As things grow over, ditching will continue to be maintained. So.
Very well. There's a motion on the floor by Councillor Gerling, seconded by Councillor Dolan. I'll call the question. All those in favor of writing a letter? Carried.
There was actually two components to that resolution. One was for the letter, and additionally, it was also to possibly, I heard possibly up to 2 times to grade the road if required.
Yeah, I didn't have a
keep an
number
idea.
on it, I don't think, but just if we could keep the road on our radar and grade it as necessary in conjunction with applying pressure to somebody to upgrade the road.
We'll do that as a second motion then. Seconded by,
The motion. It was a 2-part motion.
okay, so we're happy with that then.
We can have that as a motion unless council has any objections to what was amended as part of the motion, because that was the original motion.
Very well, okay. Moving on. Bylaw number 183, sewer rates regulation amendment. Ms. Watson.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We have a draft amendment to Bylaw 18, 2009, being the NRM Sewer Rates and Regulations Bylaw. This bylaw regulates how the sanitary system is to be used. The amendment was prompted by a residential demand for a feasible option to dispose of domestic waste that is not connected to the sanitary system, such as a septic tank. Historically, residents were using Turvita, located about 25 kilometers south of town, to dispose of their septic tank waste. This location shut down about 3 years ago. And since then, residents have been using Cleto's site, which is located up the SYD. It's a substantial distance, and residents have expressed concerns about the cost to haul their waste to this pit. Earlier this year, this site was shut down due to well, it was just shut down. And due to industrial demand, it has since reopened with disposal rates that are significantly higher than previously charged. So a resident, it could cost a resident over $1,000 to dispose of their septic tank. The amendment proposed would enable the disposal of truck domestic waste locally at a flat fee of $150. The fee is intended to be cost recovery pursuant to a defined process, which would include an application, supervision while the waste is being disposed of, and random testing to provide some level of confidence that the discharge is actually domestic waste. In addition, the amendment provides authorization to the Director of Public Works to accept or reject any request for that type of disposal. In the event a more feasible option for residents becomes available, we would not exercise this process. In addition, when we prepared the paperwork for this meeting, it was proposed that we do first, second, third, and final adoption. The province has pulled our ability to do that since we wrote this documentation. So we are asking for first, second, and third readings.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Any other comments? Councillor Goring?
So just want to confirm what I heard. So this will be for residential use only, or will it be for industrial access as well?
If it will not be for active industrial access. If there is a closed industry that needs to dispose of domestic type waste, we would consider it, probably test it.
So if there was, yeah, I don't know. So if there was a camp, instead of using the Clito one, bringing it to town because our rate is so much cheaper, then that would become very problematic.
No, a camp would be considered active.
Okay.
I mean, so the intent of the bylaw is to deal with the issues locally within the community that has to spend a significant amount of funds currently based on the limitations now for dumping. So the intent wouldn't be to allow camp waste or even if it's domestic camp waste to come to town. That's fine out there. It's the person that's spending significant amount to dispose of their septic tank in town, and the director has the ability to make exceptions if it makes sense, but the intent isn't to compete directly with the site out their Clito site. The intent is to provide an option for the locals, considering that previously it was Trinidad, and Trinidad doesn't currently accept that waste.
Councillor Andrews.
I especially like the point that Luann made there, that if something more equitable was to come, that we would cease these operations. That ensures we're not going to compete with any future business, and I like it. And with that being said, I would make a motion.
Very well.
Second and third reading.
Councillor Souls, did you have a comment or? Very well. Moved by Councillor Andrews, that the proposed Northern Rockies Region Municipality Sewer Rates and Regulation Amendment Bylaw 183 be given first, second, and third reading. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. Correspondence, Phoenix Theatre.
I am going to declare a conflict of interest. I have a contract with the Management Society for the Phoenix Theatre. So I'm going to step out.
Very well. Thank you. Who would like to speak to this?
I could speak to it.
Sure.
It's the Phoenix Theater is looking for an opportunity. They have an NDI grant opportunity, which is looking for support of council and requires a resolution, which we provide council to which can provide support to support that grant application process.
And it's for the drive-in. Councillor Gurley, did you
I
have
was
it?
just going to make the motion.
Very well.
To write the letter.
Seconder,
in
please.
support.
Seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Mrs. Lau? Thank you. Very well. Received for information, council information package for June 10th, June 17th. New business items. Very well.
In the June 10th CIP page 914 is the Legislative Assembly BC RE stumpage tabular rates for stumpage. I wanted to commend Mr. Davies on his letters that he's written, and I know he's been working along with our Chamber of Commerce to get some accurate information and with ourselves. And I thought that given that this issue around stumpage rates like this does still affect people right now in our community. I know that last winter, one local farmer was hauling logs from his farm here in Fort Nelson to Chetwynd, and it's a attempt to stay alive. I mean, that's part of farmer's life here, and he still had to pay his tabular ridiculous stumpage rate for this area, even though we ourselves have received feedback from the ministry about how awkward this looks, because it's kind of silly to have a situation where we have no milling capacity. And so the government's acknowledged the very thing that Dan has written in his letters. Government's acknowledged, but they're not doing anything. And I'd like to bring this back. I don't know whether to make a recommendation or what, but to bring this back so that council once again says, hey, government, have you seen Dan Davies' letter? Have you seen this? Let's act on this. This is a simple fix. Let's act on it. How do we, I'm just thinking of how we spoke about this and pushed this forward. The chamber then pushes it forward. Dan Davies then pushes it forward. It's our turn again to push it forward, but this needs to be repeated until someone finally gives us an answer of why, or gives us a response to it.
Mr. Barry?
We're continuing to work from a staff level with the local FinRo staff and the regional managers, so with Chris Cooper, and of course all the way up to people like Eamon Donahue and Kieran Vince, who's the red. There's some indication that there's change on the horizon. We've heard that before, so not quite sure what that looks like. We've been told that there's potential that it could be sooner than later, and there have been some commitments made and some that have not, that have come and gone in terms of dates. But we are still working on that, and it's up to council if you wish to from a political perspective, look for some other or communicate your thoughts and concerns and reinforce what's been communicated previously by council too.
Councillor Souls, would you like us to write a letter?
I would like to write a letter from council saying, or just responding to, or to reinforce what our staff is already working on, that time is of essence. I think that time is of essence, because it matters to those of us who are completely blocked from doing anything with our timber most of the time. It matters to us. It's another one of the few options we have for off-farm income to develop farms around here, and we're completely blocked by this.
Couldn't hurt. Do I have a seconder to Mr. Souls' motion? Move seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. New business, Liard Hot Springs reopening. So in discussions with our MLA, Mr. Davies, he brought up the fact that his office was being asked to open the Liard Hot Springs. Some of the citizens had brought this forward to him, and he asked if council was in favor of the opening of the hot springs. And I said I would be glad to bring that forward to council to see what council's views were on this. Since that time, I've learned of some of the difficulties in bringing the hot springs, into opening the hot springs, particularly when our own pool is closed. And some of the challenges that the province is facing when it comes to opening something like the hot springs, including disinfecting while you're in an ecologically sensitive area. So I know a lot of our residents would like to see the hot springs open. Personally, I would like to see them opened as well, but in a manner that protects the public, and probably it's not going to happen anytime soon. Any other comments, councillors? I don't know if it's appropriate to write a letter to the minister saying that we would like the hot springs open when and if it's possible to protect the public. So, Councillor Roper.
I think a request for an ETA would be reasonable.
Any other comments, councillors? Very well. Motion then to send a letter to Minister Hyman and copy to Mr. Millibar, I believe he's the opposition environment minister, asking if they have any timeline on when the hot springs would be open, and perhaps our desire to open the hot springs as long as it's in keeping with public health and safety as outlined by medical officer Bonnie Henry. All those in favor? Carried. Restart plans, Mr. Barry.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to give it a quick update regarding some of the restart plans. So relating to recreation specifically, the outdoor spaces, most of the spaces are now open with the exception of the spray park. So some additional work was required to get the spray park opened, specific to worker safety and access to the spray park. So risk rating, et cetera, required to have a safety plan in place. The hope is to have the spray park open by the end of this week, so into the weekend. That's the plan, the hope. We're focusing, of course, our efforts also on the rec center facility itself and the kids programming. So the kids programming, the summer fun program, is scheduled to start the week of July 6th. And access for the summer fun, the kids, those programming, there'll be access to the facility, the rec facility for them. And in the background, we're working on opening the facility possibly mid to late July for the facility in a phase. So not pool, potentially the facility, maybe the walking track. Stacy's going to walk through some of the work that we need to do specific to a specific task. For example, if for opening, or in this case, what was required to do the summit run this weekend, and the requirements to do that safely. And I'm sure Councillor Gerwin could probably comment on the miles of documentation that she was required to probably be part of that as a volunteer. So it's important because I know there's a sense of urgency and anxiousness to get these facilities open, to get these start to provide these levels of service. But again, a significant amount of work in the background to have it done properly and appropriately. And as Bev mentioned, WorkSafe is around, and they're there to ensure it's done properly and audit us. And we've been fortunate that when we have been audited, that we've gotten good responses and feedback from WorkSafe in terms of what we're doing, and we continue to hope to do that. So that's our, and of course, our number one priority is the safety of the employees and the public. That said, when the facility does open, it'll be open at a reduced hours, which we'll talk to council about, and reduce operating in terms of days of the week, potentially at a 5-day operating format, most likely at the start, just to ensure that we have capacity to maintain that facility based on some additional requirements as part of the safety plan. So all things that are in play. In terms of the pool, right now, no tentative date or ETA. I would throw out possibly the earliest, if we were fortunate, would be end of summer into September, possibly. And again, when we talk about that, it's which month. It's not necessarily which week. A significant amount of work, as I'd mentioned previously. So that said, Stacy was going to just provide some information for council in regards to just to get an understanding of some of that work and some of the activities that occur in the background just to get things open or to perform a certain task. So I'm just going to pass over to you, Stacy. Just cue your mic there. And thanks.
Thank you. So yeah, we took the recommendations from WorkSafe and built it into a framework document to guide the process through reopening. And the safety plan, or resuming operation safety plan, is our framework document from there. And it follows closely to WorkSafe's guidelines 6-step process for reopening. So it starting on page 5, their steps are assess the risks of the workplace, which is the largest chunk of the process, and it can involve up to 4 people depending on the area, 2 to 4 people generally. About an hour and a half long process initially, just to test out where our risks are and to start that documentation process. And from there, highlight the areas of concern specific to each individual area. So every area is going to have their own hazards and concerns. So with the package of papers, many papers I gave you there, the risk assessment, the long one, houses most of the information and controls to list the hazards in the area, to provide the recommendations. So the recommendations are all pulled from BCRPA guidelines or other guideline documents that have been given out through WorkSafe or other organizations. And then once you consider all of those, a lot of them are going to be in place already because we have a lot of operations currently running still. So there are a lot of things we're already doing. And in order to reopen, we'll have action items identified from there that we'll have to follow up on. So your action items is the last column there. And this walks through generally exposure through public use of the facility and public to staff interface. Also the coworker to coworker interface. So further on in the risk assessment. And then the last section of the risk assessment considers the risks involved in just reopening a service or area that has been closed previously. So that could be the safe startup of equipment, training new staff, or retraining staff that have been away. So that's the risk assessment process. And it also takes into account the step 2, which is implementing controls. So that's a way to track the controls. So step 2 on page 6. Again, anytime you try and address a control, you want to follow the pyramid of controls. So eliminate if possible, engineer if not, control administratively through process or procedures, and last level of protection if you can't do the ones up top, or to provide PPE. So then all of those controls and processes get pulled together into a plan specific to each area, department, or particular service that introduces a new hazard. So as we mentioned, taking the risk assessment we did for the Summit Run It, because it was a small service to offer to the community. It had a definite timeline. We'd be able to follow the full process through and have a good idea of the amount of work and time and resources are required to put it in place. So I provided the Summit Run It safety plan. This template document was filled out for specific to the Summit Run It. So The second page just highlighted the controls they put in place to control traffic, so people weren't coming into contact wherever possible. And discussing locations, contact information, and PPE as required. So this acts as the WorkSafe's recommended safety plan for that particular work site. So this was given out to volunteers, provided to participants, and posted as well on the website. So then once we have that document in place, we have to do the next step is train the staff and volunteers that have to follow it. So as I mentioned, we posted it and gave it out, but we also run it through our Safety Sync training program, which is all online. So it tracks and records the actual documentation and training. And then we follow it up with a in-person orientation on site, which also presents the information in another format in case there so there's the on-site orientation as well, which hopefully if all the reading and stuff is able to be completed ahead of time, obviously given enough time to do so. Then it's less time on site, but still probably anywhere from 20 minutes to, depending on the work site, half hour, 45 minutes to go through the orientation process in site as well. And then posting signage for the public. So the public knows all of our processes as well. So there were 3 different locations that we posted up at Summit for signage. And from step 5, so the next piece of paper I have, or the last one in the stack, evaluation of controls. So we have to now monitor, once we have all these processes in place, make sure that they're effective, make sure that people understand the information that's given out, make sure that we didn't miss anything in the process and need to reevaluate and put new things in the mix, new processes, or anything else that comes up in the run of an event, a day, an operation. And possibly have to run the whole thing through from steps 1 to 5 again, depending on what comes up in our controls assessment. So for the Summit Run It, we had, it was a pretty simple event. It required very little in the way of actual control measures. We had a little bit of signage we had to do and some barriers we put out. Now, I would say setup time took an hour or so on site. Orientation, another 10-15 minutes to go through that. And another hour or so for Krista to finalize it all and review afterwards. With admin time, we're probably looking 8 hours of actual staff time that goes into the planning and safety process. And then over a 2-week or so timeline to get the signage and controls all in place. Very, very rough. We're working it out as we go along. We haven't reopened very many services or areas yet, but hopefully with this time frame in mind, we can use this to apply it to the next stages. So we have a good idea of what it's going to take for stages 8 to 56. Yeah, that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Gerwing.
So given the rules that we have to play by in today's world, do you anticipate doing this for each event that we are hoping to host?
So with the amount of work we've already put in, all our policies and procedures we have in place, we have a lot of the work done already. And every additional risk assessment, we clean up a few more things. So it's as we go along, each one's going to be less depending on the area. It's anytime we introduce anything brand new. So when we go to look at the pool, it's going to be a big consideration because it's a completely different hazard than our other areas. Most of the programs and events will be able to kind of use the same process. The risk assessment will just be tailored to consider any new hazards introduced. So I'm expecting the timeline to go down for similar activities. And each site should probably have a whole process done and each type of program. So children's programming will probably look at one assessment, one safety plan. The camps have their own. We did one for the parks, but we'll do an additional one for the spray park because it introduces new hazard.
Right. So in terms of volunteers, I'm wondering if you are working towards creating something a bit more manageable for volunteers, because I had to read all this. And did I really, like, could I not just have read the Summit Run It safety plan? You know what I mean? Like, so I did it, but really, I think we're going to be hard pressed to have volunteers at events if they have to sort through all of this material. So just wondering if there isn't some sort of volunteer portal that we could be using that with just specific information for that event so that people can continue to volunteer.
Yeah, and I think this was a good test of our process, and we can see there's a lot of information that's the same in each additional document that you have to go through. And
Stacey, I'll
hopefully,
just add. So one of the nice things also as well, Councillor Growing, is a lot of the base information, once you've read it once, you don't have to repeat that. Then if you were to volunteer for the Summit Run It again next year or another run event, we would just hand you that run event safety plan.
Yeah.
The smaller one.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I'm good now.
Are there any other questions from Mrs. Aspden? Very well, thank you very much for this report.
Just back July 13th, we plan on bringing back a report to council. Stacey was saying now that we're working through this, we get a bit of a sense of timing. So even though dates might move, we plan on bringing a report back to council with some of the outstanding areas that haven't been opened yet to give an approximate time frame of what it might look like for reopening, right? Depending on the activities. So that's the intent, is to get that to council for the July 13th meeting.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Mrs. Laval.
Sorry. Also on July 13th, as part of being the policy group for the NRM, we will require council resolution in support of the main safety plan. So that is the single document that is titled COVID-19 Resuming Operations Safety Plan. So we will require council resolution on this framework document. We will we'll probably be at version 1 or 1.2 by the time July 13th comes. So we will send you a refresh, but we'll try to highlight the changes.
Good idea. So if all of council has to go on the computer and spend the 10 minutes, and you can't exit before the 10 minutes, otherwise it's not marked as read.
I read.
I think I'll ask for a paper copy, I think. Any other questions? Any comments? Very well. Any council reports? Councilor Gurring.
So just to let you know that I will be attending the BC Rural and First Nations Health and Wellness Summit, June 29th and 30th via Zoom. Shayna Dolan is attending as well, and somebody from BC Emergency Services, I believe. And just wondering if any staff might have interest to attend, but I spoke with Mr. Berry about that, and so working on that right now. I also attended the Fort Nelson and District Chamber of Commerce board meeting on June 11th, and I attended the annual Summit Run It, and it was a fantastic event. And my hat is totally off to Mrs. Aspen there for all of the work that she did in order to make that race go ahead. It was fabulous, and congratulations really to Angela White and Krista Pearson for organizing and executing that in the midst of all of this. It was really well done, and it was a lot of fun. Chief James Child and Jennifer Johnson were also there in attendance, offering first aid support should it have been needed. And BC Parks had 2 park rangers there for the whole time, and I was able to make some solid connections with them. The 2 rangers are currently working on completing the seasonal work plan for the area, and they're more than willing to update our community as the work is completed. And I've got the contact information for one of the rangers. And it was really interesting because 2 campers from Summit stopped by to see what was happening, because we had Canada flags up there and tents and everything. And it turns out that they're big trail racers. And all of the races that they had intended to do this year have been canceled. This was the only race that they knew of that was actually going ahead. So they were really, really impressed by that. And then when the runners first started coming down and they saw the times, they were so impressed at the time of the runners that they said, next year they're all coming up and they're bringing their friends, and they're going like, hey, where do you guys advertise? And we're going, well, we don't advertise. So they were really excited. They're going to put it on their agenda to attend. So yeah, hats off to everybody involved. It was great.
Excellent. Public news, media questions? Any questions? Very well. I'll ask for a resolution to move to a closed meeting. Moved by Councillor Roper, seconded by Councillor Andrews, and negotiations related to discussions respecting the proposed provisions of a municipal service. They're at their preliminary stages. All those in favor? Carried.